But, uh, tough choices are going to have to be made, and those are the choices that the new leaders are pursuing. And so I've answered your question about what I think some of the risks are. It doesn't work in reality because it's a very basic thing. There's a debtor and a creditor, okay? The creditor has savings, and so in saving, they want to receive a return on their money. And if that money does not provide them with a real return, they'll put it into something else, gold, something else, and so on. So you have to have interest rates that are high enough so that the creditor gets a good return, but not so high that it breaks the back of the debtor. And when you have a lot of that debt, and so on, that balancing act, because one man's debt's another man's assets, you have that balancing act that becomes more difficult. When you print money, you do not make productivity. You just make more money. Money doesn't have any value, okay? The more money you make, it's okay, double the amount of money. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we just could double the amount of money and then have benefits from it? But it doesn't give you anything, really, okay? It's only productivity that gives you something. So the idea that I'll print more money and give it away is a transfer of wealth, essentially, from that undermines proper lending of money, and because that balance has to be taken care of. Are you wastefully producing the money, or are you productively producing the money? And the cost, like anything else, make it free, okay, and you're not going to have it well handled. You're going to produce more inflation. So, and if you are in a position where you make interest rates not high enough for the creditor and not and that balance, then what you're going to have is inflation. You're going to have that money coming out. And worse than just the new supply of money is that people won't want to hold the debt instruments that they're holding. Because the way that storehold of wealth is, when you hold a bond, you get this money that everybody's printing, and it's going to go down in value, okay? And you don't want that. You'd rather hold it in some things that are going to hold their value. And that's basic. What I would have liked best is the recognition that the majority of the people have to be behind policies. You need reforms. You definitely need reforms. You need broad-based reforms that includes things that have not been mentioned in this plan, such as education. The most important thing that you need, I believe, is quality education that provides broad-based skills and also teaches civility so the country operates well and creates, well, but anyway, whatever, so that we cannot simply get there if we don't have a policy that is, that everybody believes in, that you work towards. So my idea of the Manhattan Project was to get the most skilled people from both sides, not the extremes, but the extremes frighten me because you're going to have a war between one set of extremes and another set of extremes. It's not going to be good. And you can't neglect a population that is going to perhaps be neglected by these types of policies. Capitalism will not do it all. So as a result, my Manhattan Project was making bipartisan. What I would have preferred is a bipartisan cabinet, by way of example, to be able to bring together the smartest and the best, and then you engineer how do you create the reforms and you get the majority of people behind it. So that's what I meant by that type of Manhattan Project. But we are going down this path. And, and many people believe that this is the path, just like people believe that the other path, let's say the Democratic path, would have been a different path. So we're on this path, and we hope that that path is successful in making those renovations to be able to raise productivity. We certainly need renovations. And if it delivers, then people will be happy. I am worried about the areas that they won't deliver, but that's always part of it. And this is the plan. And so everybody can argue about the plan, so much so that you can't execute a plan. Okay, this is the plan. And, I hope they do it well. You are having, in the particular appointments that you're having, is non-compromisers. You are having extremely loyal and black and white, strong people who will not compromise much about anything. And so that's what's going to happen over that administration. And in order for them to achieve their goals, they're going to have to prioritize. There are a number of things they want to do. The first 100 days of an administration is very important in terms of the what's accomplished. And certainly the first 2 years is critical because there are midterm elections and everything can change depending on how that goes. And so you're going to have to see prioritization of things. What are we going to do in immigration? What are you going to do in trade and tariffs? What are you going to do in technology? What are you going to do in energy policies and industrial policies, capital markets, deregulation? All of those things are on their list. They're going to have to now, these aspirations are going to hit the realities and come in conflict with those realities. Laws will have to be changed. And to change laws is complicated and so on. But there's a determination that some of these things, most of those things, have to be done in that period of time. So I think you're going to see very forceful actions during that period of time and prioritization. I think that they can overdo things in a way where the thinking of some parts of the population who are left behind and are not benefiting from that could be important. I think that they're forgetting about education, for example. I think the most important thing to reform is to affect children at a young age to be able to be of good character and good capability. And I'm seeing that education is not going to be pursued. And I think that there can be such an alienation of the other side that that becomes a problem in the longer run. So, but I understand that perspective, and that they have to make those decisions and get them through. And that's what a renovation looks like. If you would take a company, how do you renovate a company? You might cut back a lot on the workforce. You might create lots of disruptions to get that company in good shape. And that's basically what the attempt is going to be by people who have done those things and are inclined to do those things. So,
all right,
of course, the people part of it, the establishing a minimum standard, let's say, of education and civility. I'm very much exposed to the poor, underprivileged people. I'm in Connecticut. My wife works to try to help those who are living in school districts and areas where there's gangs, there's poverty, there's terrible education, it's an environment that if I was to live in those environments, I would be a revolutionary. And how do you establish that foundation that nobody falls below, that there's a certain level of how do you deal with that? I don't think that that's going to be well dealt with, but tough choices are going to have to be made, and those are the choices that the new leaders are pursuing. And so I've answered your question about what I think some of the risks.
Summary. Ray Dalio discusses the complexities of economic policy, emphasizing the delicate balance between creditors and debtors and the fundamental importance of productivity. He critiques the simplistic approach of printing money, arguing that merely increasing the money supply does not create real value. Instead, he stresses that true economic progress comes from increasing productivity, implementing meaningful reforms, and maintaining a balanced approach to monetary policy that provides fair returns to creditors while not overburdening debtors. The discussion then shifts to political leadership and the challenges of governance. Dalio expresses concern about the current political approach, which he sees as lacking compromise and potentially alienating large segments of the population. He advocates for a Manhattan Project style of leadership that brings together the most skilled individuals from different perspectives, rather than relying on extreme viewpoints. He particularly emphasizes the critical importance of education as a foundational element for societal progress and economic development. Dalio provides a nuanced critique of the current political renovation process, comparing it to corporate restructuring. While acknowledging that tough choices must be made, he warns about the potential negative consequences of aggressive policy implementation that fails to consider the needs of marginalized populations. He shares personal insights about the challenges faced by underprivileged communities and expresses worry about the lack of attention to establishing a minimum standard of education and social support. Ultimately, he hopes for successful implementation of reforms, but remains cautious about the potential outcomes.